We want to perform a chi-square test. So here's the commands that we're going to need, and here is the data that we're going to use for this particular test. Now in this case, what we have here is we've got three types of malaria, and we've got three different regions. And we're trying to find out are certain kinds of malaria more likely to be found in certain regions. And so that we're going to use a chi-square test. It's a test for independence. We're trying to see if the type of malaria is independent of the region. In other words, is there any kind of relationship between the type of malaria and where it actually might be found? So the null is there is no relationship between the type of malaria and the region, and the alternate is there is some sort of a relationship. So to do that, we need to get the data into our commands. So we do this. What we're going to do is we're going to take one row at a time and type it in. So we've got 31, 14, 45. Now we go to the next row, which is 2, 5, 53. Then we go to the next row, which is 53, 45, 2. Okay, so we've taken each one row at a time. We've put the data up here. This is the first row. This is the second row. This is the third row. Okay, now we need the number of entries per row. That's what this means, number of entries per row. So here's a row, and we have 3 entries per row. So we put a 3 there. Now let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. We're going to run the first two. This is going to load the data into a variable that we can use when we actually run the test. And this is going to make sure that we've got the data set up in the correct format. So let's run this. Execute. Okay, now I want to go over to the console. Take a look at the console. Okay, so here's the console. These are the two commands that ran. Let's see, is this data lined up in the same way it is in the table here? Yeah, it is. The first row of the data that we ran in is the same as the first row from this table, and so forth. So we've done that correctly. So now I want to go back and actually run the test. Execute. Okay, so go back to the console again. Okay, so here's our console. There's a p-value that's much smaller than 0.05, and so that means the alternate hypothesis is what we would go with. Now we want to compare this to what we would expect to see. So in order to do that, we've got to rerun this test again. And this time set it equal to a variable. So we're going to say, okay, the test, anything we want to call it. We're just going to rerun it. And then we're going to type in the, T-E-S-T, then a $, then E-X-P-E-C-T-E-D. And this will give us what we would expect to happen if it was independent. So this is the sorts of variables, these are the values we would expect to see. If you notice, for example, this bottom row is much different than the bottom row. And this is the real data. This is what we would expect. Look at the differences. That's telling us where everything differs. Okay. Now that's the end of the chi-square test.